According to an article I read in Psychology Today, most fantasies serve a specific purpose. They can entertain, distract, frighten, or in the case of sexual fantasies, they can be arousing. So fantasies about specific goals can foster creativity, help someone better understand their wants and needs, and even enable them to plan for the future. My name is Tricia Sulpizio. I'm your host for another episode of Tea and Bedtime Stories, a podcast for anyone who likes to discuss great authors and their books. In this episode, I will continue reading A Farewell to Arms, a novel by Ernest Hemingway, published in 1929. Last time we read Chapter 6 in Book 1, and I will continue with Chapter 7. After the reading, I'll follow up with some quick facts and my impressions. So let's begin with Book 1, Chapter 7. I came back the next afternoon from our first mountain post and stopped the car at the Smistimiento, where the wounded and sick were sorted by all their papers and the papers marked for the different hospitals. I had been driving and I sat in the car and the driver took the papers in. It was a hot day, and the sky was very bright and blue, and the road was white and dusty. I sat in the high seat of the Fiat and thought about nothing. A regiment went by in the road, and I watched them pass. The men were hot and sweating. Some wore their steel helmets, but most of them carried them slung from their packs. Most of the helmets were too big and came down almost over the ears of the men who wore them. The officers all wore helmets, better-fitting helmets. It was half of the Brigata Basilicata. I identified them by their red and white striped collar mark. There were stragglers going by long after the regiment had passed, men who could not keep up with their platoons. They were sweaty, dusty, and tired. Some looked pretty bad. A soldier came along after the last of the stragglers. He was walking with a limp. He stopped and sat down beside the road. I got down and went over. "What's the matter?" He looked at me and then stood up. "I'm going on." "What's the trouble?" "The war." "What's wrong with your leg?" "It's not my leg. I got a rupture." "Why didn't you ride with the transport?" I asked. "Why don't you go to the hospital?" "They won't let me. The lieutenant said I slipped the truss on purpose." "Let me feel it. It's way out." "Which side is it on?" "Here." I felt it. "Cough," I said. "I'm afraid it will make it bigger." "It's twice as big as it was this morning." "Sit down," I said. "As soon as I get the papers on these wounded, I'll take you along the road and drop you off with your medical officers." "He'll say I did it on purpose." "They can't do anything," I said. "It's not a wound. You've had it before, haven't you?" "Yeah, but I lost the truss." "They'll send you to a hospital." "Can't I stay here, Tenente?" "No, I haven't any papers for you." The driver came out of the door with the papers for the wounded in the car. 4 for 105, 2 for 132, he said. They were hospitals beyond the river. "You drive," I said. I helped the soldier with the rupture up on the seat with us. "You speak English?" he asked. "Sure." "How do you like this goddamn war?" "Rotten." "I say it's rotten. Jesus Christ, I say it's rotten." "Were you in the States?" "Sure, in Pittsburgh." "I knew you was an American." "Don't I talk Italian good enough?" "I knew you was an American, all right. Another American," said the driver in Italian, looking at the hernia man. "Listen, Lieutenant. Do you have to take me to that regiment?" "Yes." "Because the captain doctor knew I had this rupture. I threw away the goddamn truss so it would get bad and I wouldn't have to go to the line again." I see. Couldn't you take me no place else? If it was closer to the front, I could take you to the first medical post. But back here, you got to have papers. If I go back, they'll make me get operated on, and then they'll put me back in the line all the time. I thought it over. You wouldn't want to go in the line all the time, would you? He asked. No. Jesus Christ, ain't this goddamn war. Listen, I said. You get out and fall down by the road, get a bump on your head, and I'll pick you up on our way back, and I'll take you to a hospital. We'll stop by the road here, although. We stopped at the side of the road. I helped him down. I'll be right here, Lieutenant, he said. So long, I said. We went on and passed the regiment about a mile ahead, then crossed the river, cloudy with snow water and running fast through the spiles of the bridge. The road along the road across the plain. To ride along the road across the plain and deliver the wounded back at the 2 hospitals. I drove coming back and went fast with the empty car to find the man from Pittsburgh. First we passed the regiment, hotter and slower than ever, then the stragglers. Then we saw a horse ambulance stop by the road. 2 men were lifting the hernia man to put him in. They had come back for him. He shook his head at me. His helmet was off and his forehead was bleeding below the hairline. His nose was skinned and there was dust on the bloody patch and dust in his hair. Look at the bump, Lieutenant, he shouted. Nothing to do. They came back for me. When I got back to the villa, it was 5 o'clock, and I went out where we washed the cars to take a shower. Then I made out my report in my room, sitting in my trousers and an undershirt in front of the open window. In 2 days, the offensive was to start, and I would go with the cars to Plava. It was a long time since I had written to the States, and I knew I should write. But I had let it go so long that it was almost impossible to write now. There was nothing to write about. I sent a couple of Army Zona de Guerra postcards crossing out everything except I am well. That should handle them. These postcards would be very fine in America, strange and mysterious. It was a strange and mysterious war zone, but I suppose it was quite well run and grim compared to the other wars with the Austrians. The Austrian army was created to give Napoleon victories, any Napoleon. I wished we had a Napoleon, but instead we had Il General Cardona, fat and prosperous, and Vittorio Emanuele, the tiny man with the long thin neck and the goat beard. Over on the right they had the Duke of Aosta. Maybe he was too good looking to be a great general, but he looked like a man. Lots of them would have liked him to be king. He looked like a king. He was the king's uncle and commanded the 3rd Army. We were in the 2nd Army. There were some British batteries up with the 3rd Army. I had met 2 gunners from that lot in Milan. They were very nice and we had a big evening. They were big and shy and embarrassed and very appreciative together of anything that happened. I wish that I was with the British. It would have been much simpler. Still, I would probably have been killed. I mean, the ambulance business. Yes, even in the ambulance business. British ambulance drivers were killed sometimes. Well, I knew I would not be killed, not in this war. It did not have anything to do with me. It seemed no more dangerous to me, myself, than war in the movies. I wish to God it was over, though. Maybe it would finish this summer. Maybe the Austrians would crack. They had always cracked in other wars. What was the matter with this war? Everybody said the French were through. Rinaldi said that the French had mutinied and troops marched on Paris. I asked him what happened, and he said, oh, they stopped them. I wanted to go to Austria without war. I wanted to go to the Black Forest. I wanted to go to the Harz Mountains. Where were the Harz Mountains, anyway? They were fighting in the Carpathians. I did not want to go there anyway. It might be good, though. I could go to Spain if there was no war. The sun was going down and the day was cooling off. After supper, I would go and see Catherine Barkley. I wish she were here now. I wished I were in Milan with her. I would like to eat at the Cova and then walk down the Via Manzoni in the hot evening and cross over and turn off along the canal and go to the hotel with Catherine Barkley. Maybe she would. Maybe she would pretend that I was her boy that was killed, and we would go in the front door and the porter would take off his cap and I would stop at the concierge desk and ask for the key. And she would stand by the elevator, and then we would get in the elevator and go up very slowly, clicking all the floors. And then our floor. And the boy would open the door and stand there, and she would step out. And I would step out, and we would walk down the hall, and I would put the key in the door and open it, and go in, and then take down the telephone. And ask them to send a bottle of Capri Bianca in a silver bucket full of ice, and you would hear the ice against the pail coming down the corridor, and the boy would knock, and I would say, "Leave it outside the door, please," because we would not want to wear any clothes because of it so hot, and the window open, and the swallows flying over the roofs of the houses, and when it was dark afterward, and you went to the window, very small bats hunting over the houses and close down over the trees, and we would drink the Capri, and the door locked, and it hot, and only a sheet, and the whole night, and we would both love each other all night in the hot night in Milan. That was how it ought to be. I would eat quickly and go see Catherine Barkley. They talked too much at the mess, and I drank wine because tonight we were not all brothers unless I drank a little and talked with the priest about Archbishop Ireland, who was, it seems, a nobleman, and with whose injustice the injustices he had received, and in which I participated as an American, and of which I had never heard. I feigned acquaintance. It would have been impolite not to have known something of them when I had listened to such a splendid explanation of their causes, which were, after all, it seemed, misunderstandings. I thought he had a fine name, and he came from Minnesota, which made a lovely name. Ireland of Minnesota, Ireland of Wisconsin, Ireland of Michigan. What made it pretty was that it sounded like island. No, that wasn't it. There was more to it than that. Yes, Father. That is true, Father. Perhaps, Father. No, Father. Well, maybe, yes, Father. You know more than I do, Father. The priest was good but dull. The officers were not good but dull. The king was good but dull. The wine was bad but not dull. It took the enamel off your teeth and left it on the roof of your mouth. And the priest was locked up, Roca said, because they found the 3% bonds in his person. It was in France, of course. Here they would never have arrested him. He denied all knowledge of the 5% bonds. This took place at Béziers. I was there and reading of it in the paper. Went to the jail and asked to see the priest. It was quite evident that he had stolen bonds. I don't believe a word of this, Rinaldi said. Just as you like, Roca said, but I'm telling it for our priest here. It is very informative. He is a priest. He will appreciate it. The priest smiled. Go on, he said. I'm listening. Of course, some of the bonds were not accounted for, but the priest had all of the 3% bonds and several local obligations. I forget exactly what they were. So I went to the jail. Now, this is the point of the story. And I stood outside his cell, and I said as though I were going to confession, Bless me, Father, for you have sinned. There was great laughter from everyone. And what did he say? Asked the priest. Roca ignored this and went on to explain the joke to me. You see the point, don't you? It seemed it was a very funny joke if you understood it properly. They poured me more wine, and I told the story about the English private soldier who was placed under a shower bath. Then the major told the story of the 11 Czechoslovaks and the Hungarian corporal. After some wine, I told the story of the jockey who found the penny. The major said that there was an Italian story, something like that, about the duchess who could not sleep all night. At this point, the priest left, and I told the story about the traveling salesman who arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning at Marseille when the mistral was blowing. The major said he had heard a report that I could drink. I denied this. He said it was true, and by the corpse of Bacchus, he would test whether it was true or not. Not Bacchus, I said. Not Bacchus. Yes, Bacchus, he said. I should drink cup for cup and glass for glass with Bossi Filippo Vincenza. Bossi said no, that this was no test because he'd already drunk twice as much as I. I said that was a foul lie, and Bacchus or no Bacchus, Filippo Vincenza Bossi or Bossi Filippo Vincenza had never touched a drop all evening. And what was his name anyway? He said, was my name Federico Enrico or Enrico Federico? I said, let the best man win, Bacchus barred. And the major started with us with wine in mugs. Halfway through the wine, I did not want any more. I remembered where I was going. Bossi wins, I said. He's a better man than I. Have to go. He does really, said Rinaldi. He has a rendezvous. I know all about it. I have to go. Another night, said Bossi. Another night when you feel stronger. He slapped me on the shoulder. There were lighted candles on the table. All of the officers were very happy. Good night, gentlemen, I said. Rinaldi went out with me. We stood outside the door on the path. He said, you better not go up there drunk. I'm not drunk, Rinny. Really. You better chew some coffee. Nonsense. I'll get some, baby. You walk up and down. He came back with a handful of roasted coffee beans. Chew those, baby, and God be with you. Bacchus, I said. I'll walk down with you. I'm perfectly all right. We walked along together through the town, and I chewed the coffee at the gate of the driveway that led up the British villa. Rinaldi said goodnight. Good night, I said. Why don't you come in? He shook his head. No, he said. I like the simpler pleasures. Thank you for the coffee beans. Nothing, baby, nothing. I started down the driveway. The outlines of the cypress that lined it were sharp and clear. I looked back and saw Rinaldi standing watching me and waved to him. I sat in the reception hall of the villa waiting for Catherine Barclay to come down. Someone was coming down the hall. I stood up, but it was not Catherine. It was Miss Ferguson. Hello, she said. Catherine asked me to tell you she was sorry she could not see you this evening. I'm so sorry. I hope she's not ill. She's not awful well. Will you tell her how sorry I am? Yes, I will. Do you think it would be any good to try and see her tomorrow? Yes, I do. Thank you very much, I said good night. I went out the door and suddenly I felt lonely and empty. I had treated seeing Catherine very lightly, and I had gotten somewhat drunk and had nearly forgotten to come. But when I could not see her there, I was feeling lonely and hollow. That's the end of chapter 7 in book 1. So some quick facts. Smistimento in Italian literally just means sorting. So he's talking about the sorting station. He calls it the smistimento. I don't understand. Okay. Maybe he was just trying to be colorful. The Brigata Basilicata that he was talking about with the red and white stripes on their lapel is probably referring to the 91st Infantry Unit. It was a well-tested and well-decorated brigade of Italian soldiers. They fought often in this war, and they always fought valiantly. In fact, 2 regiments of the brigade were awarded the Silver Medal of Valor for holding the line in 2 different combat areas. But I'm certain that their presence at the battle served to encourage the other troops in the area. Just by seeing them show up probably boosted morale. The hernia that the man was describing, if you don't know what that is, it's usually a torn muscle in the abdomen that causes either whatever tissue, or often what I've seen is your small intestine kind of protrudes, and so it just looks like a big lump. It can get really bad if it's not trussed. So the truss is the bandage that you wrap around to try to hold the organ inside your body, so that the tear in the muscle doesn't get any bigger, so it prevents the worsening. So when the soldier from Pittsburgh talked about how he took off his truss, he was trying to hurt himself so that he would be disqualified from fighting. That's pretty crazy. Spiles, I had to look that up too. Those are just the large wooden support beams for the bridge when he was talking about the water rushing through the spiles. When he was talking about the postcards, Zona di Guerra, that just means war zone. But the army would print special postcards for the soldiers to send home. And I linked in the description a website that shows you the image, what those look like. When he's referring to Luigi Cardona, he was the Army's chief of staff. He became chief of staff like weeks before the war started, and he has a terrible reputation amongst the troops because the Italians were ill-equipped for modern warfare. They didn't have the infrastructure to, build cars, trucks, munitions, all the stuff that they would need for their war. And Cadorna always blamed his troops for any failures. And he never took any responsibility, so he was known for doling out very harsh punishments. But he was appointed by Vittorio Emanuele, who's the little short king that the story refers to in chapter 1. In fact, they were both near the same height, so they were not opposing figures. So when he describes the Duke of Aosta, there are lots of Dukes of Aosta, so it's hard to figure out which one, but they're all pretty tall. And they all had better reputations. It's just funny to me that when we think about leadership, everyone has daddy issues. Because if you think about it, it's built into our evolutionary psychology that we our first image of an authority figure is usually our father figure, whoever that might be. And they're always much taller than us because we're children when we first encounter them. So looks are probably what he was referring to, the way that the Duke looked versus the way that little Emmanuel or Vittorio and Luigi looked. They weren't very formidable, which I think that's funny that he foreshadowed that in chapter 1. In America, we like to downplay the importance of physical appearance, or we try to act like it doesn't matter in choosing our leaders. But speaking from personal experience, it's the only deciding factor. Nobody cares about the character of our leaders. It's shameful. All we really care about is if they fit the optics of what we think a leader should look like. It's stupid. And you can argue with me all you want, but I'll give you 100 reasons why you're wrong. And here's one of them. I'll tell you a little story. I worked for this couple. They were Boston Democrats, and all that implies. I babysat their kids. It was one of my part-time jobs when I was like 18. And they insisted that I call myself, or that everybody call me, their children's caregivers, if that gives you any insight into their personalities. But that year that I worked for them, George Sr. Was running for presidential election, right? It was after the Reagan era. And he had not yet announced his running mate until the RNC. And I remember like it was yesterday because I was so shocked by her statements. But we were watching the RNC. He announces Dan Quayle as his running mate, and her words were, "Oh my God, he's cute. I'd vote for him." She just was so stunned by that because she was willing to abandon all of her principles. I don't know if she actually did, but it was kind of a funny anecdote. Maybe you had to be there. But yeah, we don't care about character or qualities. We generally tend to care about what someone looks like. It's really freaking sad. But anyway, the Italian army was under-equipped and ill-prepared, as I said, for machine warfare. And so when he mentions the British gas masks that they got, that's a really important piece of information because it was such an important piece of equipment for the soldiers. Before they were issued British gas masks, they were given these weird pieces of cloth. They were just like cloth hoods that they were instructed to like soak in urine or something. They thought the ammonia would kill the gas. And so the Germans, because they had all these chemical plants, were inventing new forms of gas, and it's what was debilitating the Italians soldiers in all of the earlier battles. So in this particular battle that's coming up, the fact that they all had gas masks gave them a huge advantage. And they end up winning this battle. Or nobody wins in war, but you get the point. Black Forest and Harz Mountains that he was describing, those are both in Germany. So he's kind of lamenting, like, this war is inhibiting my ability to travel. Again, so naive when he talks about the Carpathian Mountains, right? Obviously, he thinks he's at summer camp. But the Carpathian Mountains are in Eastern Europe. That's probably where he was probably referring to the Russian front. But when he fantasizes about being in Milan with Catherine, when he mentions the Via Manzoni, it's basically just like an outdoor shopping mall type thing. Sounds lovely. The Capri Bianca, that just means white wine. When he was talking about chilling it in a silver ice bucket. Béziers is a city in South France when they were telling the story about the priest who stole the bonds. Also, Mistral was a word I had never heard of. But when he talks about the Mistral blowing in Marseille, it's basically just a strange word for a hard, cold wind. Again, he's probably just trying to add some colorful language to the story. When they talk about the corpse of Bacchus, he was the god of wine. In fact, Michelangelo created a sculpture of Bacchus that sits in the National Museum in Florence today. And I do want to clarify, I did make a few errors that I should correct. The narrator of the story's name, I guess, is Peter Henry. I just remembered it wrong. I also made a mistake, I think, in first episode. I think I said there were 6,000 who died of cholera, but in the book it mentioned 7,000. But I was just going off of my memory, so I apologize if I mispronounced names or places, and that was confusing for anyone. But not to make excuses, I do record each episode extemporaneously, meaning that I have an outline that I'm following, but it's intended as conversational speech, not a monologue. So I don't edit these recordings at all other than simply stopping and starting where I want it to begin. So again, I apologize for any confusion. But my impressions of this chapter, I think it's interesting that the narrator finally admits that he's detached from the conflict and that he naively believes nothing will happen to him because it's not his war. But war is not a game. And I'm sure he'll find out that truth soon enough. I do really appreciate the consistency of messaging, in that it's really helpful for me as an audience member. The characters, because of their consistency in tone and style, they just seem a lot more authentic, and it's easier to relate to the characters when you know, to the story itself when you know that it's going to be consistent. But because Ernest's writing is so vague, I think we as audience members have to do most of this heavy lifting to reduce our uncertainty about what's going on in the story. So it kind of forces me to listen more empathetically so I can try to understand the characters' actions and what motivates them. It's kind of ingenious. But it's also understandable why some people don't like these books or his writing style, because it does require the use of more brain power, and humans are cognitive misers, meaning we have a limited amount of thinking resources that we can use, and systematic processing like this is very taxing. It costs us a lot. I don't know about you. I could sit in a chair for a few hours just writing or reading or something, and I feel tired because I've expended so much energy, mental energy. So anyway, I try not to waste time on insignificant or unimportant details. That's why I forget specific names and things like that, because it's just really taxing when you're just trying to look at the big picture of things. So I really hope in some way you're finding this series edifying. It is for me, because every day I have to expand my knowledge base, exercise my working memory, improve my communication skills. I'm basically writing an informative speech every single day. So anyway, back to my impressions of the story. This kid is in trouble. He doesn't know it yet, but he's in trouble. And he is clearly becoming attached to Catherine, or at least he's becoming attached to the idea of her. I really think she, in her weirdness, awoke his romantic side. And I think it caught him off guard. Like, his fantasies about spending the weekend with her in Milan demonstrate how his infatuation with her image is growing. And it shows, like, another counterpoint is it shows the stark contrast between the superficial relationships he's had with the girls in the brothels and her, I don't know, pureness, innocence, whatever. But it also highlights the fact that while those, sexual relationships can be very exciting, they're ultimately really unfulfilling. And in a weird way, all those encounters that he's had with all those other girls have sort of created this longing that he has for something more substantive. And I think he sees something more substantive in Catherine, which is why he's fantasizing about her and spending the weekend together. It's not, he wants more. And it's unfortunate, because I think a lot of men in our culture are conditioned to ignore the romantic parts of themselves. They're directly discouraged from expressing any of their vulnerability. They either experience a rejection by showering their affection on the wrong person, or they get ridiculed by their friends. And I think it shuts them down emotionally, which is really kind of sad. But Catherine is proven to be a safe target in a weird way because she's kind of a peripheral figure in his life, right? He doesn't have to introduce her to the family or worry about any of that. And so it's kind of safe to risk loving her. I don't know. I may be projecting, but I think he's still afraid of his own feelings. I mean, it makes sense that he would feel nervous because there's not a lot of substance to their relationship yet. And I don't think he has any kind of a game plan of how to approach her or how to make anything happen. I think she recognized that. That's why she called him boy over and over again in their last meeting. But I think that's why, I think he got nervous and that's why he got drunk instead of rushing to go see her. Even though he clearly wanted to. And oddly enough, or ironically, I don't know, missing seeing her is serving to like deepen his infatuation. Right? It definitely increases the sexual tension between them, which I think she knows, which is why that whole thing about her not coming down. I don't know. I think he's a goner in terms of getting hurt. And that's probably why they call this a tragic love story. But anyway, we shall see. So that's all I have for you for chapter 7. In the next episode, I'll continue reading book 1, chapter 8 of A Farewell to Arms. Please join me next time for more tea and bedtime stories. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks for listening.